The point of this video is to improve your life, and there's one key trait found in every successful person: extreme accountability. So I've compiled 3 controversial philosophers that are commonly misunderstood. Understand them and you'll have the advantage of accountability over everyone else. Number 1, trauma does not exist. Is not denying the fact that a horrible experience, calamity, is not influential to who you are as a person. Instead, the influences are actually very strong, but in the opposite. This means the past does not determine who you are. You are not bounded by fate because something has happened to you and you are now forced to react a certain way. Instead, you have control, you have accountability, you have the possibility to change. And that is based off of the psychologist, the philosopher Alfred Adler, who, by the way, was a contemporary to Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. The only issue is you've never heard of him, I've never heard of him, because he's never taught in any educational systems like school or college because of that one idea. Trauma does not exist. This is the catalyst to why he was never popular. It is because if trauma does not exist, what does that mean to us? Does that mean we no longer have the excuse of being a prideful, slothful, envious, whatever the 7 deadly sins are? Does that mean we are no longer allowed to play into our sins? Does that mean we have control over our own actions? Yes, the belief is we determine our own lives based off of our past experiences. It is the perception of what has happened to us that is defining of who we are. It is not what has actually objectively happened, because our perception gives us control. And we can see this in abuse victims. Just because you have been abused does not mean you are now bound by fate to react in a certain way. Instead, it is up to the person, the perception to how they want to live their life forward. But here's the biggest question: does that mean the people who are choosing to react to those negative experiences, are they actively allowing themselves to indulge, to be a bad person? Do they want? Is there an incentive to be sorrowful? Yes, there is. Remember, we have extreme control. We have accountability over our lives. Then that means the people who are choosing to be hateful, slothful, wrathful, all those people are choosing to have that emotion, to live life that way. And I heavily recommend reading the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. I made a video about it. I went into depth. But remember, you have to read the book. You have to come to your own conclusion because there's nuance to everything. This does not mean he is 100% correct, because number 2, assume formlessness. This does not mean everything in life is accurate. This does not mean there's one rule, there's one pattern, and you should follow it for the rest of your life. Assume formlessness. I tutor students at a college, and one of them was hounding at me, raising his voice to teach him the pattern or rule to English literacy. And I told him, there is no pattern or rule to English. It requires nuance. You have to look at the context. You have to see what's being said. And sometimes it doesn't even matter, and you have to brute force everything through pure memorization. I say all of this because fuck English. English is super simple to understand because we're all English speakers, but if you expand the context to something outside of English, all of us, including myself, cling to patterns and rules as if it's absolute because we're so ignorant about it. We see this in stereotyping. We see this in the silliest things because of the Dunning-Kruger effect. They think they're so smart, they know it all, that I'm able to allow and give judgment to another person based off of any little characteristic. But we know that the person is actually dumb. They think they're smart because of their lack of information. And one key thing that people miss about the Dunning-Kruger effect is that it never ends. Once you learn about the fallacy, you think you're now smart because your information has been fed. But over time, you realize, oh, I was actually just missing this. And then you're actually smart again. But then you learn something again and you're actually dumb again. It's a never-ending cycle of you realizing you're not smart. And one of my favorite philosophers, Socrates, said, I know that I know nothing. And remember, to be emotionally attached to a specific pattern, rule, or belief just says that you are insecure. And by the way, this also applies to science. You think that everything during this conversation is only about these intangible things, but if you look at scientific studies, every single one of them contradicts each other. There can be studies about sleeping late at night is actually good for you, and then sleeping early at night is actually good for you. It requires nuance. And this is why assuming formlessness is so important, because it allows you to take accountability for not knowing what you don't know, because you really know nothing. And here's the most important point that I'm trying to hammer down. Because we know nothing, it allows us to pick and choose what is most beneficial for us. This is referencing one of my previous videos where just because a belief could be seen as wrong does not mean you should not believe in it, because if it is beneficial for you, then it's worth believing in. Assume formlessness. So, does that mean my previous point about trauma not existing actually does exist? Yes. And I'm not trying to like pull your finger, try to piss you off or anything, but here's the thing. In the context of what Alfred Adler was specifically talking about, he is mentioning fully functioning adults that have the ability to perceive and interpret their past experiences. But if we look at children, they can't. Most children act based off of their innate desires. That's why, as a parent, you are not allowed to let them overindulge, because guess what? Without an impulse control, they'll just constantly eat candy. They will never endingly scroll through TikTok. That's why parents are there. It's to control their innate desires. And when a bad experience happens to a child, they don't really have control until they become self-aware, they gain consciousness. So trauma does exist. And the thing to take away from this is that this does not mean you become an empty slate and you don't have a belief in a singular thing. Instead, set your goals and believe in things that are most beneficial to you. That's the most important point. Now, number 3, juvenoia. This is a theme you can see in all of my videos. And I lied. Assume formlessness. I am not giving you number 3. That will be in my next video. But remember this key point. Anything and everything can be true. So again, you now have the control and accountability to choose what you want to believe in. And choosing what you get to believe in gives you control, again, accountability into accomplishing your goals. Because anything and everything can be true. Just remember that some people come to this realization and then go down the path of being a contrarian. Because the opposite idea is more rare and niche, it makes me a more rare and niche person by default, but that's a fallacy. It's a very scary path to tread, but just remember, it's all in your hands. And hopefully you don't get too scared of it. Thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and please, don't be mad that I didn't give you a number 3, because again, I'm already teaching you to assume formlessness, taking away your expectations, blah, 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 blah. Check out my second channel, Toodly-doo.